Hey guys, I'm Nate, welcome back to the workshop. Everyone loves a good bonfire, whether it's hot or cold outside, but sometimes it doesn't make sense to really get a giant fire going. The purpose of today's video is to see if we can build a portable tabletop fire pit that we can move around with us. This is a slightly more complicated build than some, so we do have quite a few parts that we're going to be working with. For the main body of the fire pit, we have this medium-sized plastic container and a metal pie tin. As the fuel for our tabletop fire pit, we have this little canister of propane butane mix. Usually these are for powering camping stoves when you go hiking. Speaking of camp stoves, we have a small one of those we bought on Amazon that we're going to disassemble to use as a regulator to get the fuel out of our tank. We have a bunch of paint sticks that we're going to use to decorate the outside of our container once everything is built. Then we've got some of these blue glass beads that we can use as a decorative element to make the top of our fire pit look a lot nicer. For the workings of our fire pit, we have some 1/4-inch copper tubing and some copper fittings, as well as a small piece of 3/8-inch vinyl tubing. The rest of what I have here is hardware and supplies to attach the other pieces together, and I'll go over those as I get to them. We've got all of our supplies and equipment ready, let's start building. The first step in building is actually going to be disassembling some of the parts that we have. Our plastic container has a lid and a latch that we aren't going to need, so let's just take them off. Now let's take the camp stove out of the box and break it down to just the parts that we need. Pretty neat little stove. Collapses down really small. Now what we want is this orange part down at the bottom that works as a regulator for the fuel. The rest of this stove we actually aren't going to use. Just by grabbing this top part, I'm able to twist, and this will unscrew from the regulator. Once that's done, everything else is sort of connected to it. There's also this little brass nozzle at the tip of our stove, and that helps regulate the speed at which the fuel comes out. Normally that's a good thing, but we want the fuel to come out a little bit faster than this nozzle is designed to allow. So let's remove it as well. Let's secure that in the vise. Now I'm just gonna take a pair of pliers. That is pretty stuck on there, but it is removable. It's enough force. It's full of these really tiny, I can't tell, maybe they're brass rods or brass beads. Those are super little. Now we have the piece of the regulator that we want to use on our fuel canister. This regulator just screws right down onto our fuel canister, and then we can open and close it as we like. At this point, if we twist this handle right here, fuel will start coming out. But I don't really just want to spray propane and butane into the air, so I'm not going to do that at the moment. We're going to want our metal pan to be nice and secure in its attachment to our plastic container. But we don't want it permanently affixed because that would make it impossible to switch out the fuel if we run out. What we're going to do is we're going to take 4 of these metal brackets and we're going to have a magnet attached to the top of each one of them. We also have an assortment of these small machine bolts, and we're going to use these to attach the magnets permanently to the brackets, and then we'll also use them to attach the brackets to the plastic container. With the magnet on the bracket, one of the screws passing through the magnet and the bracket, we're going to attach a washer and then a nut to keep it nice and secured in place. That feels nice and secure. Now let's do the same thing for the other 3 brackets. Now we need to attach our 4 brackets at 4 equal points around our plastic container. With those 4 points marked on the side of the plastic container, let's drill 4 small holes, one at each point, just large enough for our small screws to fit through. It's these fun little spiral plastic pieces. I'm trying not to press too hard because I really want it to cut through the plastic rather than breaking through at the end. Now we should be able to line our brackets up with those holes and attach the screw right in place. To help make sure the screws don't damage the plastic, I do have some rubber washers that I'm going to use. I just want to make sure I don't crack through the side of the plastic when I tighten down the bolts. The head on these screws is pretty small, and if I try, I can actually pass it through the rubber washer. So I'm going to be using a regular washer first, and then the rubber washer. That's lightly attached. I'm not going to tighten it down quite yet, so at the moment, this bracket can still move around fairly freely. Let's attach the other 3 the same way. There we go, we've got all 4 brackets loosely attached to our plastic container, and here's why we didn't anchor those down really firmly yet. I want to make sure that they all sit perfectly level with each other. Let's take our plastic container, flip it upside down, and secure it to the bottom of our metal pan. we can just as easily flip it right side up and we can get a good look at how this is going to work. And you can see that the magnets are providing a really strong attachment, which is just what we want. With our magnets attached to the bottom of the pan, we know that all 4 are sticking up from the plastic container the same amount. We're not going to end up with 3 of them in contact and 1 of them with a small gap. With our brackets measured out so we know they're at the right height, let's tighten down the bolts. There we go. At this point we should be able to pull our pan off, our brackets will stay in place, and now we know that when we put our pan back on, it will be in good contact with all 4 brackets at once. And it's very well attached. But we can still take it off when we need to change out the fuel. The next step is we want to prep our copper tubing and how it's going to attach to our metal pan. The tubing will be coming straight up the middle of our plastic container, so let's drill a hole in the center of our pan to let it come through. To find the center of this pan, I'm going to just try and balance it on the tip of a pen until it's staying in one spot. That'll let me know where the middle of the pan is. There we go, we've got a balance point. If we're off by a couple of millimeters here or there, it's really not going to make a difference, so this point will work. We want to drill a hole that's big enough that the widest part of our 1/4 inch copper elbow fitting will fit through the hole. That is so close. You can see that the drill bit fits inside the copper fitting right there, which makes sense because it's designed to fit 3/8 inch pipe here. Let's try the next size up. It might be too large. That is definitely big enough, but it's really a lot more than we want. So I think let's take our 3/8 inch drill bit and then we'll just sort of wiggle it around inside the pan a little bit to open up the hole. There we go. Beautiful. Our copper fitting now fits through that hole. Let's look at the layout we're going to want for our copper pipes. Our vinyl tube fits perfectly into this 3/8 to 1/4 inch copper adapter. It's a pretty snug fit too, so I'm really not worried about any gas leaking out of it. The fuel will travel up the tube through this copper fitting. We'll have another piece of copper connecting these two. Then we'll have this elbow, which will run out another straight piece of copper tube. Connected to that will be a second elbow. We'll have a nice tight circle of copper tubing that comes back to about right here to be finished off with an end cap. Let's start by bending the copper tube that we need in our circle and cutting that off. I got this copper pipe at Lowe's. It came in a coil about 3, maybe 4 feet long in a cardboard box. I think it was about $5. Copper is very flexible, which makes it easier to bend into a circle, but you do have to be careful because if you bend it too aggressively, it will kink in the middle, and then the gas won't be able to flow through the piping well. I want a nice clean edge to start our copper pipe, so first I'm just going to cut this off using a hacksaw. I actually want to be pretty gentle putting it in the vise because since copper is so soft, it could very easily get squished in the vise here. I just want it to hold it in place. There we go, we have a much cleaner edge on this now. Let's just take a file and clean it up a little bit more too. If we've cut the end of our pipe off nicely, it should fit into the end of our elbow piece. Perfect. With the end of our pipe cut, we now want to bend it into a circle with a diameter of 4 to 5 inches. You can see that the copper pipe is fairly easy to bend even with just your hands. You can also see that as I'm bending it, it is getting narrower than it is when it's unbent. This is what I meant when I said you have to be careful. If you were to bend it too hard, we would get a kink in the pipe. There we go, I think that's bent into a pretty good circle. It's fairly tight, it hasn't kinked too badly. I do have one spot here where it started to smash the tube. I'm gonna see if I can use a pair of pliers and get that out a little bit. It shouldn't cause any problems. It's definitely still wide enough that the gas can flow through it. But just to make it a little bit nicer, let's see if we can bring that back out a little. There we go, I think that popped out a little bit. Now we want to cut off the excess of our copper pipe. Let's do that right about there. I didn't really like using the vise on the copper. I thought it was pinching it a little too much. So I'm just gonna try and hold it down using this wooden block and my own body weight. Whew. Of course, I should be using a pipe cutter rather than a hacksaw, but I don't have one. Let's just use our file and clean up that edge a little bit. All right, and our cap fits nicely on the end of that. Now we need to cut off a section of our 1/4 inch copper pipe to connect these two pieces. There we go, that's a pretty nice straight section of pipe, so we'll cut out the rest of our fittings from that part. We've got our little fitting. Of course, let's take our file and clean it up so it fits nicely into both of our pieces. That end looks good. There we go. Both pieces are fitting just the way we want them to. With our regulator in place, our 3/8 inch vinyl tubing should fit very snugly over the nozzle. In fact, it's snug enough that when I twist it, I can get it to fit down onto the threads, and that actually helps tighten it into place. The reason I'm using vinyl tubing instead of metal hardware is that I could not find any other metal hardware that fit nicely onto this thread. It seems to be a size that doesn't conform to standard threading. So clearly we have way more tubing than is going to be necessary. In fact, I think we want to cut it down so it's only about 3/4 of an inch tall. Fits nice and snug into our copper. There we go. Now if we drop that down into the bottom of the container, we can see how long of a fitting we need to connect from the source of the fuel up into our metal pan. I'm gonna do a little test. I cut this 1-inch piece to connect our elbow into our circle. I'm gonna see if that's close to the right size to connect these other 2 pieces. This length of pipe does seem to be working, but this particular piece of pipe is only barely inside this connection point. So I'm going to measure this piece's length and then cut another piece that's about 1/4 inch longer. All right, fits there pretty nicely. Magnets. Looks like it fits there great too. That looks like a perfect fit. We've now got all of our pieces cut out, shaped, and ready to assemble. So come back tomorrow and we'll show you how to permanently attach them all together and form them into a beautiful tabletop fire pit. Thanks for joining us for the first half of this video. Don't forget to come gear yourself up with products and merch at thekingofrandom.com. See you there. Just gonna have to space them apart. Magnets. In the meantime, remember. I can't say the word remember.
Hey guys, thank you for your comments. So many of you have really interesting suggestions for projects and experiments, and we love testing those out for you. I also wanted to say thank you for the great feedback you're leaving for me and my team, because we're all in this together. So thank you for being on our team.